Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Greg Chapman Show. This is a show mainly meant for facilitators and trainers conducting workshops virtually or face to face. The workshops could be any kind of behavioral topics from leadership to self awareness to high performing teams. The idea of doing this long form conversation is to help fellow facilitators and trainers learn techniques, change their mindsets, bust open some facilitation myths, or even tips and tricks. And all this coming from masters of their craft from across the world. If you're starting anew or you're a veteran at this, there's something in here for you. And the guest of my show today is Bharat Babbar. Bharat's been a facilitator for a little more than 15 years now. And in his previous role, he was a partner at Maynard Lay. He was also a COO. And most of the facilitation he did over there was around teams and working with leaders, unearthing, learning, and teaching at the same time. Essentially, what makes high performing teams high performing teams. He's also studied acting and has made films in Los Angeles, working with actors across the world. He's also acted in numerous plays, films, TV, and commercials. Welcome to the show, Bharat.
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here, and I must say, it sounds so good listening about myself through you. You just make me sound so credible.
Well, you are.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. Straight off the show, straight off the bat, Bharat, acting to facilitation. Tell us a little more about that. What got you here from there, and how'd you keep going back?
I think my I think my journey is in circles. Long time ago, seems like a lifetime ago, I was negotiating with my dad what to do in my summer holidays, and I really wanted to spend my time playing cricket. And my dad insisted that I'm now grown up and I need to start his place of work. And very reluctantly, I started doing so. And I did not enjoy being there at all. There was this strong air of authority that was required to run the space, and I don't know how to explain it to you, but in my dad's words, and I'm going to say it in Hindi first, I'll just paraphrase, कि लोगों से काम निकलवाने के लिए ना गालियां देनी पड़ती है. So basically, what he was trying to tell me is that if you need to get work done out of people, you need to be able to abuse them, and that is something I fundamentally felt a disconnect with. I just didn't know how to do that. So it just became the circle of I'll go there, and I won't be good at what I'm supposed to do, and I'll just get out of there listening to even more feedback from my father, which wasn't very pleasant. And I asked myself a question: there has to be a better way to work with people, and I think I dropped that question. But inherently, I was a very self-conscious, introverted kid at that time. Was also beginning to feel frustrated with himself, and I was like, you know what, this person who I am cannot function in this world, so I need to become somebody else. And I was an avid reader, so acting for me was this attempt to become somebody else. So I thought, acting is a good thing, and I love a lot of books. I used to read a lot of fiction, and I thought, you know what, maybe I should learn acting to see if I can transform into another person. And I think that fundamental question and that learning of acting gave me and my voice a lot of expression. It really helped me understand myself. And yeah, I think that's from that world, I sort of came back to the fundamental question that there has to be a better way to work with people. So that's why I feel things have sort of worked in a loop for me.
Interesting. And it's quite fascinating how a question has been at the core of the pivot, how it's been able to pivot you and move you, help you take decisions, the power of questions, and thanks for being so open, Bharat.
Absolutely.
Now, some time ago, I facilitated myself for the last, I think, 20 years or so. And I've seen right across from when I started facilitation to right now, this thing that I do has actually changed me as a person, I think, for the better. I don't know how many roles and jobs and things people do really change them as a person. I have a lot of discussions and meet a lot of participants, and as I'm talking to a lot of people, 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 people aren't liking what they do and don't see their job or what they do change them for the better as a person. And I was saying, is that something that you resonate with, Echo? Has facilitation changed you as a person, and a little bit about the how on that part?
I think the first part of your question, do I resonate with it? I think absolutely. Sometimes I feel like facilitators have this double difficulty because we are there to get people to experience potential new ways of exploring a part of themselves and their relationships. And there's so much that comes out of facilitating with somebody, even for the facilitator themselves. And the fact that if I'm doing this work and I'm doing it regularly enough, thankfully and hopefully, it's almost like a reiteration of, am I doing this in my life also? I'm working with people, and so it's a constant reflection. And for me personally, I think what really works is being authentic around some of the things. I don't claim that I'm able to incorporate everything, but that constant check is just making sure that I level up every single time. I'd feel guilty if I wasn't. So yeah, so I think
Yeah.
presentation plus hard work on the self.
Right.
Yes.
Nice, nice. I'll tell you one bad win which has changed me. I really have to bite back on giving advice. There's just too much of that. And the New Year's coming up, and in fact, that's one of the things. Resolution almost. It's come to that I want to stay away from giving too much advice. But yeah, this kind of work that we do does change that.
Yeah.
So, Bharat, moving from there, and I want to, in a way, move a little away from you being a facilitator, right? And putting yourself in the shoes of your audience. So, you, as a facilitator, you would have attended many workshops and programs as part of your development. Yeah. Now, sitting on the other side, what's an experience, a workshop experience, a classroom experience that you had been part of that really left an impression on you? And as you answer that question, I'm also going to be coming with a follow-up question, saying that that left an impression on you. To what extent was that impression due to the facilitator or the content? And to what extent was that impression, that change, that epiphany, that aha, a part of where you are in life, the stage at which you are in life? And as you think about that, I'll give you an example of my own, so give you some time to think on that also. So there's this book, for example, I've been reading. So it's called "The Obstacle Is the Way." Yeah, by Ryan Holiday. Now, had I read this book, let's say 10 years ago, a nice book, and I would have had some learnings. But because of the experience, a little work that's happened on self, and at the stage of life I'm in, it's left so much of an impression on me. I like to gift books, so now I'm wondering, should I gift this to people, to someone? Because I'm saying, would people really have a takeaway? God knows where they are, or well, so that's a bit of a question in my mind. But that's kind of brings to the fore what I'm trying to say in terms of an example. So yeah, so if you can just share an experience which has left a mark on you? And then to what extent was it a facilitator, and to what extent was it where you're in life?
Hmm. Listening to your idea of gifting this particular book to people, I also have an idea and I want to
Mhm.
share it with you. And it completely opposes your thing of giving less advice. But I
Mhm.
thought a good way of thinking whether people would have a takeaway or not is when you were reading the book, if you feel a particular chapter reminded you of
Mhm.
said person,
Mhm.
I think while giving the book, it's to say that, and you know what, when I was reading this chapter, it really made me think of.
Right. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. I think it'll make me also do a little more hard work and add a little more value to the other person. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a damn good idea.
You've asked me a loaded question simply because it's taking me back so many years, and I'm looking at these big chapters in my life. Um, I think there are quite a few strong moments where I feel like I've been uh, affected by a facilitator, whether or not I was able to comprehend
Mhm.
some of it in that moment. One of the earliest ones being my work with this person named Barry John. He was one of my earliest mentors, and working with him was, I think, both fascinating and very challenging. And
Mhm.
I think I was quite young and as mature that I thought I was at that time.
Mhm.
I think it was a realization that maybe perhaps not. I think with him and the work that I did with him and the challenge that he would give me made sort of get me to a place of the ability to be open and to attempt and try new things constantly without fear. Uh, because God knows, when I joined theater classes for the first time, every session was like a mini heart attack for me.
Mhm.
At that time, I was so self conscious and so introverted that every time he'd ask me to get up or do something, I would just give myself a fever in that moment. And I think there was this moment I remember, I think it was part of an improvisation,
Mhm.
and I did the improvisation, but something about the improvisation didn't make sense to me, and I wondered. I don't remember the details of it. I wish I did, but I remember something had happened in that improvisation, and I said, "But I don't think something like this will happen in real life." And he kept looking at me and said, "But you just did it." And I was like, "Yeah, but this is an improvisation. No, you just did it." And
Mhm.
at that point, it just left me so thoroughly confused. And I think it was much later I realized that why not? And this ability to just do things in the moment and realize that as a species, we are capable of everything. Uh, and therefore, it is possible,
Yeah.
is something I learned in retrospect.
Yeah.
There was
It's
another
interesting.
part.
It's
Mm,
interesting that you say that because very often in training, um, people can have an instant epiphany then and there,
yeah.
or um, they can, yeah, we know this simple stuff or doesn't resonate with me, but post the workshop, when they go out into the real world and they do something, meet someone, attend a particular meeting, then it hits, wow, that's something that I did. And
Yeah.
yeah, so just going back to the experience that you narrated, so to what extent would you say was it because you gave yourself to that experience? To what extent was it because you were really, really, your motivation to learn was really high? And to, or to what extent was it your mentor Barry John's
Mm.
and your teacher, his technique in that entire piece?
I think it may have been a few things. Fundamentally, I think I was in this place. I don't know how open of a learner I was. So I feel a lot of my learnings then came as epiphanies or in retrospect. But
Mhm.
in that moment, that my biggest motivator was to challenge myself or
Mhm.
really make myself uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So that led me through the experiences. But I feel if I were to think about what could have helped make the process more in the moment, and if not instantaneously, quicker for me, was to shut down this internal voice that kept saying, but this is an improv. I don't know if something like this can happen in real life. This constant looking at it from a critical perspective, I
Yeah.
think, is what held back the learning for me. And had I just been open and thrown myself in it, I feel like I would have walked away with things a little faster and perhaps quicker, sooner, for sure.
So don't want to go the cliched route, but I think maybe sometimes cliches are true as well. So being in the moment, letting go a little bit of your baggage that you've accumulated, and
Yeah.
putting lenses of good, bad, can do, can't do. This is who I am. This is who I'm not.
Yeah.
Also, kind of adds to the experience, the learning, and the takeaway that people, you know. So, how do you, if you could, and we can come back to this if you like, uh, how do you engineer, or if you impromptu, whatever technique you're using, but so it's one thing where a participant comes to the class saying, hey, I want to be in the moment, I want to be present.
Hmm.
The other part, or the other side of the coin, is you're creating a system that's driving the behavior, i.e., the design
Yeah.
of the program. So, anything around how could you design, or how could you nudge a people? I mean, apart from just saying, "Hey, be in the present moment," how could you design that into the workshop? Because this is an important piece. There's a lot of movement on the mindfulness, on being in the here and now.
Hmm.
Several hundreds or maybe thousand books written on them. So, how do you engineer this in the workshop?
I think this I learned from the world of theater. Uh,
Mhm.
One of the things that in theater we're famous for is spending a lot of time in warm up,
Mhm.
and and the warm up is disguised. Honestly, it's what we call play state.
Mhm.
Essentially, I remember whenever I had rehearsals, whether it was rehearsals for a play that we were performing, or even if it was sessions or classes that I was facilitating, it always begins with spending a substantial amount just playing,
Mhm.
because playing is wonderful. I think when people play in that moment, they forget their roles, they forget their responsibilities, they forget their designations. Um, Sometimes even they forget their ages and the hierarchies that they're coming from. So, if in the beginning, before I get down to contracting, context, design, it's a moment of let's get up and let's just play if that's all right with you. And I don't think there's been, all the workshops I've delivered in the last 5 years, I don't think there's been any moment where somebody has said, I don't feel like playing.
Mm.
And whether we throw in a
I was
hyper,
just going to ask you that question. Has anybody ever said, "Hey, but play"?
they have been curious about it. They have been, I've seen expressions of, okay, I didn't expect this. What is going on? But all right, I'll play. And something about the word play, I think, just disarms people,
Mm.
brings about an
Right.
openness to
Right.
it. And I think, yeah, if we can get people out of their heads right in the beginning and into their bodies and just get them to play, I think there's a lot more openness. Uh, there's a lot more fun. There's a lot more engagement. And I think it sets the tone that, okay, I'm going to look forward to something today. It seems interesting.
Out of their heads and into their bodies. I was reading this, and I think it's pretty true. Something that said, "You can't dance and be sad at the same time."
Mm.
So, the emotion and body movement
Yeah.
is really connected. Now,
I do want to say the actor in me feels I can dance and can be sad. But I get what you're saying in a more social context and setting.
say
Uh,
more. What do you not want to say?
no, this is not the facilitator. I think
Okay.
this is the actor,
Uh-huh.
uh, because dance is an expression. And I was just
Yeah.
thinking that I could be dancing and I could be sad.
Okay.
if that's what I was going through. But then that dance literally, I think, becomes an extension of my feeling and emotion, and therefore, by virtue of that, expression of it. But in a social context, the idea of flailing your arms and jumping, or even if you get
Yeah.
around, imagine that it would take
Pro-
away from.
Probably which kind of dance?
Yeah.
Really slow candlelight waltz. I don't know, maybe, but yeah. You spoke of play. Now, you also mentioned that just using that word changes a lot of stuff, some little wiring up in the head.
Mm.
How is play different from just doing an activity? Trainers galore that, loads and loads of activities written up. Just use an activity. So just go to an activity. So how is this different from that part?
I think because play is meant to be pure play. Uh, I never use whatever I'm doing for playing as an excuse to debrief, for self awareness, even though it could create, absolutely, and so much can potentially come of it. But I tend to use play as just playing. So try and remove the idea of there is something to learn here, there is something to pick up from,
Yeah.
and I just use it as a thing to just get involved in, because there are activities that are designed to bring about reflections and thoughts and ideas.
Right.
But in the beginning, when I want to just play, I treat it like that. I give it its due importance. This is not to pick up or learn anything, even though it has the potential to. Because I feel if I were to do that, it would bring people back into their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking about this. So it would require good, solid design because you're also structuring it and saying, hey, I'm not going to be debriefing this part, but when you do debrief, uh, do you, so when you actually get into the other parts of the session, would you also debrief that part of play in later on, or you just let it be as play?
I let it be as play. Sometimes even my play activities are designed to create certain thoughts and everything, but I trust that I don't need to get into that, and participants will be able to make the connection uh, if there is a related activity that we end up doing, or an experience we end up working with.
Nice,
But
nice.
I do allow the play to be play. Let
Okay,
it be subconscious as opposed to a conscious
nice.
awareness of things.
Nice, interesting. So jumping off from here into a completely different question or area of exploration is that, as a facilitator, and if you've been facilitating for long enough, what would happen is you have these one or two um, things that you do. It could be a module, could be, I don't want to say activity right now, but yeah, let's just say it could be a module or something that you do that can work, that kind of flies in the face of Addy and doing analysis and understanding the context, in as much as sometimes you don't have time to understand you and me partnering. We've experienced that sometimes you don't have the luxury of understanding the context, interviewing the participants before or stakeholders,
Yeah.
and you're coming there in cold. It's
Hmm.
not something we recommend doing, but so what's something, a module or a piece that you do that, whether you're coming in cold, whether you've not spent time understanding the audience, or it is a piece that could work right across from, the kind of work that you do for senior management, mid management, or C-suite, that can work with different kinds of audiences. It's just a plug and play. And I'm asking this question because I feel that our listeners could also benefit from this and maybe imbibe something or have a takeaway, something very tangible that they can go and use in the real world. So.
Hmm. If I did not have an opportunity to understand context and background and um, Well, yes, I think as a facilitator, it does make me feel a little uncomfortable because I often wonder about the participants coming in and how are they feeling about this space. Um, I think one of the most crucial things, even more so in such a context, would be the context setting.
Mhm.
Uh, because I feel context setting right at the beginning, before we
Mhm.
get down to whatever the program is about,
Mhm.
is a good way to contract with people.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I really do in that moment is to check with people. What are their expectations? And sometimes there are people, uh, learning and development carries this how do I say, this bane or this difficulty that am I missing out on actual productive time, something that would help me generate revenue or affect my bottom line, and it's being substituted with having to be in a space and take time off, and I've been told not to look at my cell phone, and there's so many things happening. And I think when I set context,
Mhm.
is to do a check. Here is what I am here to create, and I want to check with all of you, where are you? And then taking in the moment permission.
Mhm.
You may have come here unwillingly, you may have come here because you see a need, you may have come here with a different expectation and shown
Mhm.
up at something absolutely different.
Yeah.
But the reality is both of us are now going to be here.
Mhm.
So can we let go and take a deep breath, center ourselves and say, okay, you know what, I am going to be here, can I make the most of it?
Mhm.
There's this contracting that happens between both, I feel, the
Right.
facilitator and the audience. I think it brings it to a sense of equality, and it addresses some of the elephants in the room.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
how we context and contract.
Contract is important. Yeah. Um, so something that I do is that in a workshop, a lot of people ask participants, what is it that you want to learn? What is it? What's your expectation? And I just add a one line to that. What is it that you want to give to this class? It kind of sets that up upfront, that this class is not only about take. It's also
Mm,
about drawing upon the collective experience over here. Um, you did
well,
mention, Bharat, the word permissions. What are some permissions that you deal with? How do you go about this whole thing on permissions?
hmm, what is your understanding of permission? Because there's so many different things that are popping in my head, and I wonder which one.
Yeah. So I don't know if I had something very related to context,
Mm,
but I'm forgetting the name of the person, but there's this lady who's designed something called the permission wheel, right?
mm,
And that's something you can easily Google and uh, pull up. Very interesting concept. But so for me, permissions mean that in life, as I go through life, um, I collect a lot of shoulds. Yeah, this is
mm,
what I should do. I should be strong. I should not cry. I should not be vulnerable. Um,
mm. I'm a boy, I should play with GI Joes, not
yeah,
Bob.
I should not play with GI Joes. Yeah. So, or here's one. As I was starting my training career, I felt that I looked at all these trainers around me, and there were these heavyweights, and I wanted to play catch up, and so I picked up a book and started reading. I said, I like you, I like reading. So one of them came to me and said, "Hey, you can't be reading right now." I said, "Why?" He says, "No, this is work time. So isn't reading work? No, you got to be a worker here." So, so yeah, so not so there's the absence of the permission over there, that reading equals work and not fun or not non-related work, even though in our field reading very much equals work. So yeah, we collect this. Don't play with GI Joe. So we collect a lot of these shoulds and should nots across our life, whether it's childhood or our professional life, and then sometimes exploring those shoulds or should nots, and then uh, coming out of a place of saying, so what are exploring what's really high for me, and what are some of the things that I would like to give myself permission to do, like a thought experiment, and then seeing how that works, journal a little around that. So I think so. That's what I had in mind when I was thinking about permissions.
I mean, when I hear you speak, it's triggering so many thoughts. I'm wondering which one um, is the most relevant for this. Oh, yeah, I can think of one. I think sometimes there's this should of while being a facilitator and a coach, sometimes there's this sense of purity attached that my job as a coach or
Mhm.
sometimes as a facilitator is perhaps stay within the art of questioning,
Mhm.
uh, and always bring it out and encourage the questioning. Now, I think I recognize the importance of facilitating and asking the questions so that people are able to create thoughts
Mhm.
and bridges for themselves. But I don't think that's always
Mhm.
necessary. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think about the willingness of the other person to hear.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's about seeking permission and saying, you know what, I do have something that I'd love to share with you.
Mhm.
Is it all right for me to say so?
Mhm.
And sharing it, because there are different people and there are different contexts. I think another thing that pops in my head is because we're working in a soft skill space, and human behavior is not an exact science, it's complex. There's so much that we may never know about a person and what they're going through and where they are in life. um, so it's hard to say that this is right and this is wrong, so I try to stay away from anything that boxes me into this is right and this is wrong. I feel like there is a time and need where whatever is wrong is also needed,
Mhm.
and there is a time when whatever was right may not necessarily hold true.
Wow.
And I think what matters is in that moment if we can pause and say what I'm doing,
Mhm.
um, and do I understand the implications of it.
It's
I
very
will
profound.
Yeah, I will not be the person who will say leadership should be collaborative or autocratic. I think there are moments when autocratic leadership is absolutely necessary, and there are moments when collaborative is necessary. But do I carry within me the flexibility to shift and
Yeah.
use as opposed to just adhere to a single style?
Yeah. It's like a tightrope walk,
It is.
um, and so I don't see this as a second point. It's kind of an extension to what you said up front, and the question bit that you spoke of just right now. Um, when you're talking of questions in conjunction with permissions, what I see is you're also giving yourself permission to, hey, let go of the whole questioning bit and the whole Socratic bit sometime, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and the second part of it is also taking permission and not just stuffing something down somebody's throat. And I think
May I add one more permission to this?
yeah.
It just
So let me just
occurred.
complete. So I'm saying, and this may be answering mm, an earlier question. So how do you bring a learner into the here and now? And I'm saying that by virtue of you asking yourself permission is getting you into the here and now, because unless you're aware, you can't do that.
Hmm.
And I think it's a damn good modeling behavior if people are seeing the facilitator uh, mirroring that, being in the here and now. And I'm just, you know,
Yeah.
so.
Just to add to that, I think this sort of adds to what you were saying. Uh, One permission I absolutely give myself, even as a facilitator,
Mm,
is to say I don't know.
mm,
I don't walk into the room saying that I am the biggest expert and everything that I'm going to say is something you need to do. I
right.
do my homework, I study, I juxtapose my learnings with my life lessons.
Mm,
I go through my experiences to see how or where I've been affected, whether it's
mm,
worked for me or not. But in the moment, if a participant were to raise a particular point or say something,
mm,
I give myself complete freedom to say, you know what, I hadn't thought about that, and I am going to chew on it
Wow.
and perhaps get back to you on it. But thank you for bringing that to me.
Yeah.
So I use the group itself not to say this is going to be one-way communication, but
Mhm.
it's also to say that I may not have an answer and you may not have an answer, but together can we work towards finding an answer.
Mm. Interesting. And if I were to see the flip side of this, or like, the other side of the rope, you spoke of tightropes. So I think the other side of the rope would be, don't shortchange your participants. Prepare, prepare, prepare. But
Yeah.
the moment you're also working from that preparation, but letting it go, kind of a thing.
Yes.
So time to tie a ribbon on this. We've got our last, I think, 5 minutes to go. Before we go, I just have a couple of questions to wrap this up.
Right.
One is myths, facilitation myths. What are some myths that you have encountered as you're facilitating and have either been validated or invalidated? I'll give an example as you think that one through. So there's one myth that I run into a lot, and it's been driven by facilitators themselves, that we can't get change from a 1 or 2 day standalone workshop. You need to have a longer workshop, or you need to have a more immersive experience, which is workshop with coaching or project work or something like that. Now, so that's something I don't really have a definitive answer on that one. It's worked
Mm.
both ways for me, and that's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. But yeah, so there is these myths out there. Have you run up to any one of them, and what's your take?
Um, One of them, I think, I don't know if it's a myth as such or it's a belief. When I first started doing facilitation, when it came to human behavior, um it basically was this thing about, is my style better than somebody else's style?
Mhm.
Because there are styles where somebody has a PowerPoint and people just sit through a PowerPoint and listening to best practices, and it's one-way communication. And when I first started facilitating, I did have this thing on my shoulders that, I'm experiential. I get people to realize, and
Mm.
therefore I think I am better. But I think my journey has been humbling, uh, and I feel people can learn from many different styles, and to just assume that one style is better than others,
Yeah.
uh, I think is a myth.
Hmm.
Uh,
Interesting. As you're speaking of PowerPoints, so the pendulum first was at too many death by PowerPoint, right? So too many
yeah,
slides, and then so I swung right across and said, okay, no PowerPoints, complete experiential. But I also see there's some very powerful speakers and facilitators that use PowerPoint so beautifully to anchor a thought. The visual is so rich, and it just anchors so many thoughts, and your picture's worth 1,000 words. So now I'm bringing that back in, and that's an area which I'm also learning with. And
sometimes my biggest learning has just come from observation. I haven't been part of an experience, I haven't been involved, but just sitting outside and observing. And I think that was one of my realizations, that it's not to say that only one style is the most effective, but I often do think it's a choice based in what kind of audience I'm dealing with and what do they need. So I do feel as a facilitator it's important to carry bits from different styles and see what's needed in that moment. So the ability to adapt, I think, becomes important. Mm, a second myth is something that I struggled with myself. This idea of, can a 1 day, 1 hour, 90 minutes, 1 minute, or the have such a profound impact that it changes somebody or changes their outlook or affects them.
Mhm.
Um, I think I was skeptic
Mhm.
earlier, but I think I can happily say that yes, it can happen. But the credit I may not necessarily give only to a facilitator.
Mm.
Sometimes I feel a participant is also sitting on a precipice where a little bit of a nudge can create a lot of change for them.
Absolutely. So, in fact, what's the trigger that got you to move that way? You said initially this is what you believed in. Now there's a movement. So, what got you to move?
One of my experience as a facilitator, there was this one moment I was working with this massive IT company that's headquartered in the US. And I was working with, I think, with a director or an associate director, and communication and being impactful in their communication, especially because there are dynamics that play out. Uh, you're heading a team in India and you have to convince a team abroad, especially in the US, and to come across in a way that you can, one, be authentic, establish that you're credible, and also be able to influence. And sometimes, irrespective of however knowledge I may carry, and certain things about my own self can take away from that credibility or power. Now, interestingly enough, this particular person had a disability. As a child, they had had a epileptic attack, and which had taken away a lot of the movement from their right hand. And the right hand was also a little disfigured. So I spent 2 days with this person. And while we worked on fundamentals and things, I noticed that consciously and perhaps more subconsciously, a pattern had developed in this person's body where they would try to hide this hand either behind them or in their pocket, and essentially just use their left. And one of the things I noticed in constantly hiding, it was almost like a part of him was being taken away.
Mm.
And something in my gut said that that's the bit I need to address. It had nothing to do with the content. It had nothing to do with the work that we were doing. And I remember there was this one moment where I challenged him a little bit, and uh, and I asked him how he feels about this hand, and I really got him to open up of how he feels, and it did had a lot of stories around embarrassment and shame. And then I said, "Is it going away anytime soon?" He said, "No." He's like, "Will it go away possibly ever?" And he said, "No." And I'm saying, "So then when are you going to be okay with it? When are you going to accept it?" And I think the person was feeling self-conscious, uh, but I was very careful. I wanted to push and challenge, but I didn't want to overwhelm. So I left him with a few things. And I think one amazing moment, something that I remember now, and I got really touched by it, is right towards the end of the day, he walked up to me and he took out this hand and he shook hands with me. And he said, "You know,
Wow.
this is a part of me."
Wow. Wow.
And till then, it was always using the left hand or the left to do. But he just took out this hand and said, and he shook hands with me, and I loved it.
Wow.
I think, and he
Wow.
came across so powerful in that moment.
Wow. Bharat, you've actually inadvertently, and maybe you were doing this subconsciously or consciously, I'm not sure, but you've also given some nice responses to how do you get in the here and now. And what I'm also taking away from, your response right now with your experience is that powerful, rock solid questions can actually, short circuit the subroutines running in our brain and get the person into the here and now. So that's what I'm seeing happening. Finally, uh, if you had the chance of placing a clean whiteboard in a workshop, and you knew that a facilitator would be coming in the next 5 minutes, hasn't seen you walking in, none of the participants, it's a empty room, a training room, and there's this whiteboard and you have a blue marker. What's a message that you'd like to write on that whiteboard for the facilitator that would be coming? You don't know who this facilitator could be, extremely tenured, just starting out. What's a message that you'd like to leave for that person?
Instinctively, I have an image in my head, and I have a piece of advice in my head. I don't know which one's better. Is it okay if I share both?
Go ahead.
One of the images that I like drawing on a whiteboard is I draw. I'm horrible at drawing, but I think I do really good and expressive stick figures.
Okay.
So I make a stick figure on an empty road, and I make a signpost, and that signpost is obviously showing many directions.
Yeah.
And I always draw this stick figure looking up at that signpost with a lot of question marks around his head.
Okay.
So I think for me it just exemplifies, okay, I'm at a crossroads and I have multiple options.
Yeah.
What do I need to take from here?
Yeah.
And so I like keeping that image there,
Right.
because I feel there's an open-endedness to it. It's not definitive. It's not saying you have to go in this direction only. It represents choice and curiosity. And second are two words that I think are a mantra or an affirmation that I say to myself whenever I'm facilitating. I always repeat these two lines to myself. And ooh, two and sometimes three, depending on who I'm dealing with. I say to myself, it's like I'm about to begin. So I say to myself, remember, be present, be curious, and sometimes I say be playful.
Be present, be curious, be playful. On that note, Bharat, thank you so much. We're going to wrap this up, and looking forward to catching up on a second round sometime down the line. Thank you for taking our time, Bharat. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for taking me down this memory lane, because every time you asked a question, I had all these moments popping up in my head. It felt nice to remember all of those.
Nice. Pleasure.